Hello there, welcome to Everywoman. I'm Shuli Ghosh. On this week's programme, drug abuse in Egypt. As addiction rates among men soar, families are left to pick up the pieces. Forgotten fighters, what now for the Nepalese women who fought for change? And Painted Lady, we meet the daughter of a Yakuza boss who's written a bestseller about her gangster family. We start with the growing problem of drug addiction in Egypt. With soaring unemployment and few leisure opportunities, many men are vulnerable to substance abuse. They may start with drugs like cannabis or hashish, but this often leads to harder drugs like heroin and cocaine. The problem is now so common that many women find themselves the sole provider for their family. Wives are forced to get low-paid jobs to feed their children. And as well as struggling to keep the household together, they also face the stigma of having a husband who doesn't work. Dr Medina El-Safty from the American University in Cairo joins me now to talk about this phenomenon. Dr El-Safty, just explain for us, how widespread is this problem of women having to become the sole providers for their families?
The phenomenon is definitely growing. And if we talk in general about female heads of households, I mean, not necessarily restricting that to those that have husbands with substance abuse, it's about 25% of the women in Egypt. But of course, many of these are women who are providing for a family with a husband who's into substance abuse. The phenomenon is growing. I mean, husbands getting into drugs, not necessarily hashish only, but hard drugs and so on. But it is difficult to assess the exact size of the phenomenon because the statistics are for those that seek treatment, that means in the treatment centers, or those that are caught for some reason, some criminal activity. But otherwise, there are so many on the loose, and you cannot really get the exact numbers in this case. But
drug use among men is increasing because they're what? Suffering depression, lack of self-esteem because of the economic conditions?
Yes, definitely. It's increasing. As I was just saying, the phenomenon is increasing in size because of the many economic problems, its feelings of depression, its unemployment, so many other, let's say, psychological problems related to the general economic condition. And that's definitely the reason behind the increase in the size of the phenomenon, yes.
OK, well, Doctor, stay with us. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Well, as Dr El-Safty was saying, the true numbers of drug addicts in Egypt are very hard to find. The most recent estimates put hashish users at 1.5 million, but of course that could be just the tip of the iceberg. Everywoman investigates the women forced to become the breadwinners because of their husband's addiction.
I wake up at 7 a.m. I wake the kids up and take them to school. Then I go to work. I work as a housekeeper, washing dishes, sweeping and cleaning the floors, along with ironing and the laundry. By the end of the day, I am exhausted and I return to my home to perform the same tasks again. Their father doesn't care at all and he spends the whole day at the coffee shop with his friends. He isn't aware of anything else that's going on around him. Not even his kids. These are my children, Mahmoud, Noura and Islam. I take Islam to my neighbor's house to be taken care of while I'm at work.
Many families nowadays are supported solely by the mother, even with the presence of the father. In poor areas, this phenomenon is increasingly dominant because of the absence of the husband's role in the family. In some cases, the husband could be sick, but there are other cases that we cannot ignore where the husband is not able to stay at a job. In the cases where the husband is healthy, the problem could be that he has a temporary contract or a seasonal job. Under those circumstances, a state of laziness overcomes the husband, where he neglects his family. Here, all the responsibility becomes the wife's, especially if there are children to provide for. The father then decides to stay at home or just leave the family without a provider.
I worked as a mechanic and now I stopped working. I got into a deep depression and I don't know the reason why. It made me refuse to go to work. I went to many doctors and psychologists. Still, I didn't get cured and I feel hopeless.
I travel a long way to get to work. I take more than 4 buses to get to the supermarket where I work. I start to sweep and mop the floor and arrange the products on the shelves. I work very hard to the extent where I feel so exhausted that I can't stand on my feet anymore. To make matters worse, sometimes the supermarket owner refuses to give me my salary. My husband started to mix with a very bad group of people. They had no mercy on me. They started smoking hash and drinking alcohol, and my husband joined in. He always comes home drunk and fatigued. I begged my family to intervene and try to advise him. Still, he rejected their help and didn't listen to their advice.
I used to work a long time ago, and I provided for my family. I lived a good life, and I didn't feel I needed anything else. I was content with my family, wife, and home. Suddenly one day, a bad friend invited me to another man's apartment. I found them smoking hash. They gave me a hash cigarette, and I started smoking one after the other until I became addicted. In the beginning, they used to offer me hash for free, and then as times went by, I had to buy my own hash, and I started providing them with the drugs.
I tried working in many different shops. I worked as a housekeeper at a vegetable market and other markets to provide for my children. I have 3 children, and I come home to find them on the streets while I slave away from 7 a.m. till midnight. I pray to God to punish those bad friends that introduced him to alcohol. He lived with his children and with me, and we were very happy. I had to work to provide for my family, food, drink, and all their expenses. I face bad treatment in every place I work.
I was working well at my job. I used to earn good money. Then my friends invited me to drink alcohol with them, and I did.
I tried many times to help him get well. People talked to him and advised him to change and return to his family and to his normal life. Still, he wouldn't change.
I wish that my husband goes back to work, like all normal men that I see.
I'm one of the people that pray to God that he gets better. I wish that we can have money to pay for our children's schooling and that they can live a normal life like other children.
I hope that life can be beautiful, that he recovers so that we can get back together, and I can raise my children normally and as God desires.
Some very troubling stories there. Well, Dr Medina El-Safdi from the American University in Cairo is still with us. What our report there showed was that it is the women who seem to bear the burden of this problem. They seem to have very little help. I mean, is there somewhere that they can turn?
No, not the women. I mean, we don't have centers unless you have those centers for consultation, for help. In general, not necessarily for these cases. It's interesting. I want to comment on the cases we've just listened to and seen, because they tend to sum up the whole situation as it is. The First Lady gave the reasons. I mean, unemployment, seasonal jobs, and sometimes sickness. But of course, substance abuse is a very good reason in this case. And women have nowhere to go, I mean, except support the family, because they have kids and they have to look after the kids to try to give them a good life. And even more, the husband depends on them totally.
We heard one of the women there talking about how her husband spent a lot of time at coffee shops. I know that's a big part of life in Egypt for men. Is that where some of these problems start?
You find peer pressure being a factor here in the coffee shop or with friends. You start with a cigarette offered by a friend, and then you get into the habit of that. Yes, many husbands spend most of their time in the coffee shop or with friends, and this is where the situation can start.
This is something people don't talk about in Egyptian culture, is it? I mean, people don't like to admit that they have a problem, that they're struggling.
Yes, definitely. There is denial. I mean, one very obvious characteristic of people who are under the effect of substance abuse is denial. And the whole thing is taboo. They don't talk about it. And one of the many taboos that we have in our society.
OK, do you think the government are doing enough?
The government is trying its best. This I can say. But probably not enough. You have to seek the treatment. You have to seek it yourself. So unless it is known how many seek that kind of treatment, you cannot tell what how big is the demand in that case. But the government is attempting really to handle the situation.
But what about the women? I mean, are they aware of the problems of these women-led households, the fact that women have nowhere to turn, no one to talk to, and having to deal with the stigma of all of it?
Unfortunately, unless they seek some kind of psychiatric or psychological treatment, there are counseling centers for that, and there are NGOs that are trying to help those women.
But mostly women are being left to...
Probably not enough.
Exactly. Mostly women are being left to cope on their own.
Yes, definitely. It's an individual thing. Each woman has to deal with the matter herself, has to do whatever she can do to handle the situation. And many women, I mean, sort of give up the whole thing, and they may ask for divorce or just leave the family or whatever. But in most cases, they tend to stick to the role, their responsibility. It's a cultural thing. A woman feels responsible to look after her family. Her kids in particular, children, are very important in that case.
Dr Medina El Safdie, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, after the break, the Maoist women of Nepal tell of their hidden plight, and memoirs of a tattooed lady. Shoko Tendo reveals all as the daughter of a Yakuza gang boss in Japan. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.